Okay, yeah. Welcome, RC. Good morning. So now we have our proceedings being recorded, and I welcome RC and also my dear learners to this session. Very good morning, sir. Very good morning. Uh, Today we will wind up this session little early as I have some other meeting to attend. So we will straight away go to the topic. Dear learners, yesterday we discussed an important format of feature writing, which is the book reviews, because there are a lot of kinds of features that I mean there are a lot of writings which comes under the title or under the overall paradigm of feature. So yesterday we discussed the book reviews, and book reviews are very important creative writing because it requires a lot of imagination, thinking, hard work, and ability to evaluate the writings, whether it is in it's poetry or it is prose or it is a short story or it is novel or any other form of writing. You might have seen in newspapers there are a lot of book reviews which are published, and those are very specific kind of features. We also discussed, why it is important to have a very wide knowledge of literature, not only the genre which we are talking and which we are reviewing, but other genres also. Because if we bring out comparison in terms of information or maybe contents which were not hitherto there, so those are going to be there. So then we make statements or evaluative, statements like, well, this is a new addition and it is fulfilling the gap which was there in the earlier literature that we had, and also a new addition to the domain of knowledge in that particular area. So the book reviews are very important kind of or one format of feature writing. So we discussed it yesterday quite extensively, and then we came to a conclusion that a feature writer should be very well informed, should have complete mastery over the subject upon which he or she is making a book review, and at the same time should have knowledge, should have of other areas, other domains, because you can bring out conclusions only when you read the parallel literature or whatever literature is available in a particular domain. And very importantly, that a review writer should be free from biases, free from like sexist use of language, gender biases, and also free from ideological attachment. So those are in short, we can say that one should be very balanced thought person who has eye and knack to see through the creative writing and then bring about a good book review. So I would like to make it very clear that here we are talking about the book reviews as format of feature writing, because this also comes into feature writing format. Today we are moving to block 3 of DCE02, which is feature writing, and we are discussing another very important topic, which is the travel writing. Uh, why these are features? As I told you already, that the writings which have certain amount of concrete information or factual information, and something which is added through the flair of writings and making it very appealing, catchy, yet very useful in a particular domain, in a particular area. So, if we talk about the book reviews as we discussed yesterday, book reviews are very important to let the readers know what is new in the literary circles, what are the new compositions, new writings, and what or how do one must look to them. What are the expectations, and whether those expectations are likely to be fulfilled by the new writings. So we have all those questions answered through the book reviews. As we move to travel writing, which is also a sort of feature writing, because here also we bring in a lot of expression, style, structure, according to the format of literature, and then make it very lively, very catchy. Yet, a very specific type of literature is travel writing or travel literature, because it fulfills the needs of uh, travelers who might be domestic travelers, who might not be domestic, they might be international travelers, or like that. So we come to the uh, travel writing. We will go through two, three major points about the travel writing. Uh, where do we get material for travel writing? How do we write? What are the techniques, and what are the prerequisites at the same time? What are the uh, do's and don'ts in the travel writing? So we will go through all these issues. First of all, let me just inform you that travel writing has been a very old tradition or old format of writing, because for centuries we have been reading, we have been studying, we have been discussing. We also come across number of films, movies which talks about the uh, uh, foreigners or the visitors who have been visiting country very long time back, and it continues. And one of the major tourism activity in our country is the religious tourism. Apart from the nature tourism, we also have very important type of tourism, which is the religious tourism. And not only Indians are coming to the religious places, but Indians who are settled abroad, they are also coming in large numbers. That was one, and because India is very typically located and has a huge variety of topography, climatic attractions, and also it has a large sea line, yet a very long mountain range, huge plains, and so forth. So much so that it is one of the those rarest countries in the world which have sharp contrast in temperature, climate, and also the nature's beauty that is there. So what I'm trying to tell you is that there is a very old history of writing, because history itself is writing about travels. The history appeals to travelers when they go through the history. They study about a place, study about people, study about a culture, and then they decide to go and visit that particular place. So we can say that excuse me. So we can say that writing about travel or travel writing is an old genre. Uh, of course, there has been changes recently, because with the globalization and other factors like global market, trade and commerce activities, and also due to a lot of other developmental programs, we have very changed environment in the traveling. So the earlier format of traveling, mostly sea traveling, is not there anymore. I mean, it's very very limited and more. So it is in the cruise form or the leisure travel. But traveling in general today has increased manifold, and the travelers who are traveling today have different needs. They are not there for a very long time. They are very sometimes they are for very short period, and what they require, that is very important. They require a lot of things in which the uh, latest information about the places, about the transportation sector, about the banking sector, about the commerce and trade activities, about the places to be visited, and so forth. So that kind of need is that which is required by the tourists. That's one. If there is a religious group of travelers, then that would require, like we have circuitary tourism plan for that. A large number of tourist places are put in one circuit, and then those are offered as a particular travel circuit. Specifically, if you look upon the Buddhism tourism in the country, or followers of the Buddhism, then they like to visit certain places which are related to the Buddhist thought and process and Buddhist religion. So they visit those places in one particular trip. So that way we have another type of tourism or type of tourists come for the religious places. Similarly, we have domestic travelers. They go for religious tourism purpose. They also travel certain specific destinations and venues. So what I'm trying to say is that today we have different type of traveler and traveling, and with this changed scenario in the traveling, we are required to uh, produce literature which serves the purpose of the travelers the moment they embark upon their mission. So, very importantly, uh, we have what is the background material for that. So we know that we have history books, we have the published journals, magazines, we have other collections of literature which serves as a source for writing about traveling. That is one, and there are reviews, there are uh, uh, certain countries, certain states produces their literature which speaks about their country, its destinations, its economy, its religious places, and its topography. So those are also one of the good sources of information. What is required for a travel writer? So, please note that we are not talking about general travel writing. We are writing here as a travel writing as a feature. As a matter of fact, travel writing itself is in the dimensions of feature writing. The very first question is that any travel writer should have questions in mind: what is happening, why it is happening, when it is happening, how it is happening, and who is making it happen, like that. So there are three, four questions: why, what, why, when, how, and who. So if those are there in the mind of a travel writer, then the job becomes a little easier. So what is happening? It means one must be very open to the information. So if one is open-minded, that means we are not uh, strictly restricted to reading one particular newspaper, one particular type of literature, or we are infatuated to only a particular type of programs on the television or programs on the listening the radio programs and so forth, or rather we are visiting only a particular place and we are not taking cognizance of other places, like that. So, a travel writer should keep his or her mind open. And then another thing, as I mentioned just about that, it is very important to know about different places. So, how to know about different places is to visit them. So, a travel writer should also be an avid traveler himself or herself. That is that is interesting, and at the same time, they should have an interest in studying the place, people, and the culture of a particular place. So, what we can write, you see, what makes the travel writing, what makes travel literature? So we can write the informative articles that will be a kind of feature writing. So articles, it is based on the factual information, and the only thing that you bring in information from a lot of sources and then you write. Say, for example, if one is writing about the tourism in Himalayas, so that means one should bring in basic information about Himalayas, but at the same time, one should also have information about Alps and other mountain ranges that are there across the globe. So we can compare them, and then we can bring about information about what is. We can also write about like hotel industry. We can also write about the budget hotels in South India, budget hotels in Northeast, like that. So if we are very specific, we want to give very specific information to the tourist. So we can write about very specific areas, topics. Uh, you see, sometimes there are certain articles which appears in the travel magazines. There are a lot of travel magazines like Sita, the international travel agency, also publishes certain magazines. There are certain airlines which publishes the certain. They have their own magazines. There are a lot of departments, tourism departments, ITDC, state government departments, or travel corporations. Those are publishing a lot of literature. So they also give information about primarily about their own organization, and secondly, they also provide a consortia approach, consortia information that is there about the different organizations, and then they compare it with their own, rates, menus, and services. So that kind of literature is published. Very importantly, today there is a literature about travel trade. Travel trade means there are a lot of youngsters who are visiting a lot of other countries. Uh, Previously, they used to visit Southeast Asian countries for business purpose. So they are working for different multinationals or the Indian companies. So for procurement or selling the goods, they are visiting these nations. So we need to have a literature, particularly that deals with the trade activities. So trade activities means, especially if we look at the Japanese trade magazines, those are very attractive, and they talk about their multinationals in a big way, their services, their products, their quality, their international marketing network, and so on. So, if someone is writing about, say, for example, steel industry in India, then they should also know about the Nippon and its various steel plants. They should also know about the big steel industry in Russia, in other countries. So that means if and also this kind of travel uh, literature on trade activity should also bring in the various regulations about trade and commerce activity in a particular nation. Or say, for example, one can write about the uh, Indian regulations about the international trade. For example, they can write about the regulations, write about the government policies in a particular sector. Say, for example, in the educational sector, if the foreign students are to be tapped, then there should be a proper information that can be given by the travel writing. So there are certain other lot of trade activities which are going on in the at the national level and the international level. So there it's a very good area to write about the developments in a particular trade, the rules and regulations of the law and the law of the land about that particular trade activity, and promotional activities also. Uh, it is very important that creative writing is noted or seen as a the travel writing is seen as a good creative writing. Reason being that while we write the travel literature, it requires lot of technique, lot of you know skill, because if it is not creative, if it is very flat, then it becomes purely an information. It doesn't fall into the category of literature. There are information brochures, there are information leaflets, there are certain type of literature, but when we are writing a proper travel literature, it needs a lot of creativity. Reason being that the lot of information has to be brought in, and then it has to be synthesized with the local culture, local tradition, local rituals, local trade possibilities. So that means there's a lot of things which the uh, writer has to take care of. Uh, so for that, the writer himself or herself has to be very uh, keen in that writing, should be aware, should have the sensibility and also flair of putting information in a quick, keen, and observatory method, so that when it is presented to the tourists, it is readable, it is clear, it is crispy, it is interesting, and also it has certain amount of level in the usage is in the language, so that it is also seen as a respectful publication, because that is very important. If you look at the travel industry, the literature that is produced for the travel industry is always of very high quality. It is written in a very lucid style, and sometimes we also come across certain, poetic expressions. Because when one reads the tourism literature and leisure, then one would like to, derive pleasure out of it. Sometimes you might have seen that there is a description specifically for like sea. There are a lot of shades of sea that is found in the Indian coastline. So you have golden sand beaches, you have blue sea, you have blue whale, you have a lot of marine life. So one must put it in a very very lucid, very very clear way, so that it is received well, and do not put off the tourists. So this is these are the areas that we can look for the material. This is very important that we take advantage of the material that we have around us. Second important issue about travel writing, uh, that is about locating uh, an appropriate subject. What should be the subject of writing? So that is what to be decided by the travel writer. He or she should read a lot. Perhaps it is very important that they do not stick to the prototype writing, because there are tourism is an industry these days. So if you look at it as an industry, there are many dimensions to it. So if you look upon those dimensions, perhaps we can very easily come to a conclusion that, oh yes, now it is no more a prototype writing. It needs a lot of innovation. It requires a lot of new areas to be covered under the travel writing, and the format has also changed. We know that those traditional, very expansive publications are very difficult to afford these days. So these days there is economic publications. Those are, and they should not only be available in the print form alone, but more importantly, they should be available in the soft form or digitized form, which is preferred these days, because everyone is using the high-end mobiles, the computers. So they would like to read whatever information is there about tourism, where one has an interest, but that information should be available on the uh, in the digitized or in the soft format also. So first of all, and now the format has also changed. You see, there was a time when people used to stick to the hard facts, to the hard words. That means concrete words. But today, this continues, and people do not like a lot of descriptions. Unnecessary descriptions. Tourists do not have much time. They have very little time, within which they would like to enjoy the literature, yet would like to come to the concrete information from that. Because primarily, what is the ultimate goal of the tourism literature? Basically, the ultimate goal is to derive, is to obtain information. Primarily, the objective is to obtain information. Other things are there, yes, you would like to enrich your knowledge, that is there. So, knowledge is also information. Then the tourist wants the concrete information, factual information, and at the same time they also want details, particularly about climate. So they do not want to be deceived or misled if they spend a lot of money and go to far and remote corner of the country, say for example northeast India, or say for example Lahore Spiti of Himachal Pradesh, or Leh Ladakh, or other areas where upon reaching they find that the weather is very very risky, tricky and inclement, and they have simply wasted their money, time, and took a lot of so we should inform, that means the tourism literature which is produced should give very detailed information about certain things which are challenging, particularly the climate, transportation, and inaccessibility. Because we know there are a lot of risks which the tourists have to come across when they reach those mountain heights without a proper preparation or without proper knowledge. So all these things are there. Why I'm saying these things is because these things have become part and very important features of the travel literature. Previously, we used to have very leisure travel. People used to come for a very long time. They were not in hurry, and they didn't have many things to know. I mean, like today we have business activities, we have sports activities, we have education activities, we have seminar conferences, we have business delegates which are coming for trade and commerce. So they require very specific, very concrete, very up to date, and also detailed information about the activity to which they are attached, they are involved. So as I mentioned to you that there is a promotional literature, that is there are brochure, booklet, pamphlets, and other material which is to promote a particular destination. I'm using the word destination, reason being that it is meant to meant for a place where the tourists are visiting. So these are called destinations. So there is a promotional literature that promotes particular destination, particular place to which tourists would like to visit. Secondly, we have the informative articles or informative literature, that is which is published in the magazines, which is published in the journals. So that is informative articles. That means it might be talking about, say, for example, the new industry, which is likely, which new industrial policy of the government, or it might be talking about a particular place which is having potential to be developed as an international tourism venue or like that. So there are certain articles which are there, and then there are certain reports. You know, if somebody makes a study of a particular place, particular industry, particular activity, say for example, there can be a very good report on the sports activity in the country, because there are a lot of people who have keen interest in certain sports and they would like to come and join those sports. So there can be an article which is dealing with the promotional, which is dealing with the potential in a particular area. I'm just mentioning one such example. Like if you talk about Solangnala in Manali, you talk about Oli in Uttarakhand, lot of foreign players are coming. A lot of people are coming to enjoy and also participate in the international events that are happening in these snow related activities, the snow related areas which have the snow related activities. So as I mentioned to you, that promotional literature is basically published by the departments, published by the governments, and it talks about the interest of the tourists in a particular place, what are the facilities, what are the promises, and also what are the opportunities for shopping. This is very good area of travel writing. Like a lot of shopping that is happening these days, and you might have seen each every destination is having a very long, huge market of which displays local products, and also it displays the traditional artisans products, and so it becomes quite interesting. It has the local dresses, local products that may be in form of pottery, it may be in form of handicraft, chain stitch work, or something like it. So the informative articles or informational literature is very important. As I mentioned to you, it is a very immediate demand of the tourists, but more importantly, the travel writer, particularly for informative literature, should be integrity should be done, undoubted. There shouldn't be any partiality, and one should have a knack to go for the details. This is very important. I have just now mentioned to you that if tourist is misled by the wrong information, then it can affect adversely the tourism or the tourist's interest in a particular destination. So it is very important that it is genuine, it is honestly written. There is no bias on. Means sometimes some people take sides and then promote one particular aspect. Maybe if it's just shopping arcade or shopping mall in a particular tourism place, and then you ignore some and promote some. That is not a desire. Then there are certain articles, as I mentioned to you, there are certain articles which are written particularly about the business travelers. So they should be primarily those are informational, but at the same time they carry lot of information about the government regulations, government policies about a particular business activity. As I mentioned to you, there's a reporting. Reporting is primarily to talk about a very particular activity, a specific activity in a particular place, in a particular destination. It also, the articles are also focused on the personalities. Say, for example, in Dharamshala, Himachal Pradesh, Dalai Lama is very important personality, and a lot of people like to visit his palace, his place, and they come to meet him and like that. So there can be articles about that. Then there can be articles on the important professionals in a particular line. Say, for example, these days we are talking a lot about the motivational speakers. So there can be one article for that who talks about the big motivational speakers, because they have their international fanfare. They have people who like to listen to them, not only in the country itself, outside the country also. So maybe you can talk about that also. Then these articles for the armchair traveler. I told you yesterday also this is a technical term which is armchair traveler. So what is armchair traveler? Armchair travelers are those tourists who are coming for the first time, uh, and they are interested in a particular destinations, but they have very you know they are very particular about their own comfort. They can't tolerate a discomfort or dislocations quite often. So the armchair traveler means the traveler who is coming for the first time, who is interested in a particular destination and doesn't want a lot of dislocations or discomfort. So that means he or she wants everything at hand. So those are very you know people who are very rich, people who are from high-end industry or sort of royal background or kind of thing. So they would like to, have everything at their hand. So those are armchair traveler. So for them, also there is a good scope for writing. Maybe just detailed description of a place, its facilities, its advantages, and travel plans, accessibility, like that. Another area of writing is the festivals of the of any country. India is the country of festivals, so a lot of people, let's say for example, like we have the uh, mm, Indian classical music events in South India. We have Rath Yatra. We have the Shahara in Karnataka, and then we have the Shahara functions in Kullu, which is international festival. Similarly, there are a lot of other festivals. We have Kumbh Mela. So all these festivals become a very important activities, and a lot of people can be drawn to these activities. Of course, the person who writes about these places, these activities, then they should have complete knowledge about these activities. Sometimes they also have a mythical description of the rituals that are associated with these melas and fairs and activities. So these should be very carefully written. That is very important. So, sorry for the break. So we have a lot of scope for writing. So we can choose, we can find out our topic from any one of these. Next point that I thought to discuss with you is, the is about the techniques of travel writing. So, what are the techniques? How do we write? How do we, come to writing? So, very first thing in writing about travel or the travel writing is to, collect the information. The very important part is so information can be collected through many sources. Like I mentioned to you earlier, that it is very good habit to visit different places and then keep on taking notes from the visit. Similarly, like reading is another good source of information, which can give a lot of information, and one can read and make notes and keep it as a collection, and maybe when one is able to write or in a situation to write, then taking cue from that, one can continue writing. Another important source of information about or technique about writing, about travel writing, is the consultation of a map. The maps are actually, those are what I should say. They are just like a poem. Very few words, very few lines, but a lot to be, drawn from it. So, a small map can talk about a country, talk about its climate, talk about its railway network, can talk about its road network, can talk about its air network. I mean, what not? If it is a map which also gives indication about the industry, then we know in which area of the country which type of industry is lying. So maps are very important. They are full of information. One can draw information on different parameters from a map. So consulting a map is one very important tool for the travel writing. Then another source of information is the tourist literature. As I mentioned to you, at a different period of different times, different type of material is produced. As I mentioned, also that the history books are full of information. They are talking about the people who have been visiting our country or other countries, their experiences. They are talking about the Columbus. They are talking about other people who have claimed to have taken the round of the globe. To what extent it is true, or whether they really were able to go around or not. But they gave descriptions of certain countries, their people, their products, and so forth. So one of the reasons why Indian condiments and spices are very popular around the globe is due to these, travelers, sea travelers. And another good technique of writing travel literature is the consulting the guidebooks. The guidebooks are also kind of books which talks about certain activities, certain areas very specifically. So, for example, if it is say, guidebook on the trade and commerce, then that becomes one good source of information, and one can take cue from it and can write about the trade and commerce activities which might be of interest to those industrialists who are coming from the foreign countries. And then one can also use one's own day-to-day life experiences to write, to make travel writing. How that is happening? That can be happening like this. If somebody is passing through a very particular place, very say for example, if uh, in these days we have a very large network of roads. So we have quadrilateral road connectivity, which is connecting all the four directions of the country and the states which are lying on these directions. So one can write on the huge network of roads. So how can that happen? If one is traveling by car on the roads, then one can observe what are the facilities on the highways, how what are the tourism places, tourist interest places that are adjacent to the highways, what are the logistics that are available, hotels, cafes, and so forth. So those things can be written about what is required, because millions and millions of people are traveling by air, by road, but not all the millions are writing. Those are all not travel writers. There are very few. Who are those few? Those are observants. They take cognizance of the minute tests, so they see how people are working, how do they are carrying out their agricultural activities on the national highways, adjacent to the national highways. What are the types of hotels and other logistics facilities that are available? There may be small gardens. There may be very peaceful venues. Those can be harnessed, and if one has knack to see the things, because all of us are observers, but all of us are not the writers. So a writing knack must be there. Then talk and listen. So that is very important. New information is always with the people of the place. So if we talk to them, if we don't talk to them, we don't come to know. And if we don't listen to them, we cannot have the information. So it is very important that we are good, having a skill of communication. So if we have good interpersonal communication skills, if we can talk to people, we have a lot of information. And I know that there's a lot of travel writing which is entirely based on the on information that is provided by certain people of a particular place. Moreover, it adds factuality, it adds truthfulness to the information. It is very important that we listen to what others are saying, what others have to talk about a place, and also meet people on the spot. If we are, say, for example, if we are talking about the remote areas, the areas in which people are living but are not, very, acquainted with the urban life, then how to know about those people, their constraints, their way of life, which might interest to quite a few people. So that means meet different peoples, we meet different people on the spot. That means to place upon which you are trying to build your writing, you have to meet the people of that particular place. This is very important. So I think we have to keep in mind all these things, and then using a library for verification of data. Of course, if you have data, if you have information which is given by a person, and you have through interview also, and but if you would like to verify it from the authentic sources, then you have to visit the library and it can be very well verified. Uh, Another important, or rather, I should say, the the mm, caution for the budding travel writer is that they should have informed views. What is informed views? I think that is very important to know. Informed views are that kind of piece of information or that kind of observatory conclusion that we make is which is based on facts, but not only on facts, but it is corroborated by different people so that it is not having any ambiguity or a biased information or in a partial information. So the informed views are those views which are relevant, which are endorsed by different people who are known to have authority in a particular area of knowledge. So we should have an information, we should have an informed view. Uh, that view should be endorsable, that should be supportable by the others. So that kind of view will be free from hazy, haziness, or it will not be imprecise or only adjective ridden. So it has not to be adjective ridden. It is not to be. It has to be precise. It has not to be hazy, and it should not be detail of the views culled from the books. You simply go through the books and create a lot of data and then present it. No, it has to be a data which is maintainable, which should be verifiable, and your concept should be very clear and it should be precise as well as without much adjectivity. Adjective it's not required in travel literature. So this is very important. And now the final point is very important. And this is the travel writing is a blend of factual and creative writing. As I mentioned to you, it's a blend of factual and creative writing. Some part is factual and some part is creative. How do, because say for example, if we're talking about the deep sea of our sea line coast, and how do we, so we have to be imaginative. See, you have to put in a lot of poetry into it, a lot of description into it, and describe. Primarily, we're talking about the transparent sea, but you use the different metaphors and like that. So, as a travel writer, while one has to base the writing on the factual information, but it has to be presented in a lucid style, add a lot of maybe a lot of linguistic embellishments so that it appeals to the readers. So this is what I thought to discuss with you. And now we will come to a point that is quite interesting. What is the role of photographs and sketches, in the travel writing? We all know that in travel writing, the photographs and sketches have a very important role. We have seen that if you're talking about Himalayas, if you're talking about the sea line of our country, if you are talking about the plains of the central India, the plateaus and Sundarbans, West Bengals, or the religious places, then how they become more interesting to the readers. So we bring about the photographs, we bring about the sketches, and then add those with sometimes with very little description, because some photographs are such that they are themselves, speaking a lot about what they are representing, and sometimes there are just a brief description under the photograph, and then it becomes very interesting. Sometimes there are longish articles like religious tourism in India, for example. Then there will be history of religious tourism, various religious sectors. And when we are talking about the various religious sectors, we come to particular places, we come to temples, we come to mosques, we come to gompas, we come to churches and those ancient buildings which are associated with different faiths. So we give the pictures of these places. So that is the place where photographs are very important, and they add a lot to. So we use color photographs, we use black and white photographs, and we also use the color slides. Only one thing is you might have seen that sometimes there is a cropping. That is what. So if you go and take pictures, photographs, or they may be black and white. If you prepare sketches, sketches are of course drawn for a very particular person, particular place to be represented in through the sketch. But if we talk about the pictures, those pictures have to be made relevant and effective. So particularly these people who are professional publishers, if you put some photograph, they will crop it. Crop it means they will make it more relevant, more effective, so as to save the space and also making it very relevant to that particular piece of information about which the travel writer is talking about. So there is also masking. Some masking. Masking is something like you bring a haziness to the picture. You might have seen like Chernobyl blast, atomic reactor blast in USSR. So if you bring in that photograph as such, then that will be very. The place itself will look very bright, very beautiful, and so forth. But it has a dark side to it. So when you want to represent the dark side to it, or say for example the tsunami effect, so the coastal line having multi-story buildings and cafe restaurants, that doesn't talk about the disaster which the tsunami had brought in. So what people do, they they bring some haziness into it. So so what we call this is a masking. So they sort of bring about certain unclearness to it, so that it represents that aspect, not uh, its beauty alone, but with but that aspect for which it is known more predominantly. There are places which are known for their beauty, so we do not do much hazing, much masking or cropping, but there are places which have certain incidents, certain memories associated to them, which are not very, which are rather little unpleasant. So we want to bring that effect into it. So that is called the masking. So there's a masking also, particularly with the polluting industry, atomic explosion, reactors explosion, tsunami. Bhopal gas is one such event. So nowhere you will find Bhopal, the gas plant as represented as a beautiful piece of piece which is representing beauty, nature, and this. But we will find it always in a shrouded with the cloud of smoke and like that. So it is very intentionally presented that way. So it is called the masking. So that also takes place in the photographs. So photographs and sketches are very important. Sometimes if you do not have the photographs, then one also draws the sketches, and those also make good addition uh, uh, to the travel writing. Only thing is sometimes it is very challenging, you know, to give captions to the pictures. There are pictures, but it is very difficult to give them a caption. So you know, I always quote one caption, which is the uh, 15 days in the lap of Himalayas. 15 days in the lap of Himalayas. That means if you want to advertise Himalayas and want to make writing, travel writing, or want to contribute an article with the photographs of Himalayas, how do you represent that your stay in Himalayas in summer will be very serene, very peaceful, and the climate is very almost very cool and so forth. So sometimes we say 15 days in the lap of Himalayas. You don't have to say anything else. So it is very challenging to give caption to the pictures. So if you talk about say Gulmarg, if we talk about Oli, or if you talk about Uti, so you cannot say beauty of Uti. It's not like this. So you can say in the lap of nature in Uti, like that. So it has to be very striking, and different people can give different titles, different captions, and these are one of the best example of creativeness in the travel writing. So if your captions are catchy, they can be very interesting. They can give lot of information about the picture which you have decided to, or photograph which you have decided to incorporate in your travel writing. So, roughly, I mean, briefly saying, talking about the uh, travel writing, it is full of innovation. As I mentioned just now, that there's a little fact in it, and there is a creativity in it. So it has to be a combination of both actuality as well as the creativity. Only thing one has to keep one's mind, eyes, senses open, be a good observer, and use appropriate language. Now we move to another point of discussion, and this is about the interviews. Uh, interviews, there are features which are based on the interviews also. So, it is very important that we understand the whole process. The other day also we spoke, we discussed what is interview, what is who is interviewer, who is interviewee, and what should be format of the interview. It can be personality interview, it can be an administrator's interview, it can be an interview about good morning, welcome. It can be interview about oh yes, no issue, no issue. Please come and join. So it can be about the place about which one has. Okay, no issue. It can be an interview about information about a place. It can be an interview about an old person who has participated in various social and political activities. It can be about an acclaimed player, an acclaimed personality. Those are like cine industry personalities, sportsmen, and other people who have made big achievements in life. So there's a lot of scope for interviews, uh, but and the interviews make very good feature writing because it brings in a lot of information, new information rather I should be saying it, and it's very important that this format is developed and features are based on the interviews. So we know that, and sometimes there are articles also which are based on the interviews. These articles are very interesting articles. Reason being, they carry new information and also they carry not only new information about an information which is segmented. Say, for example, if we're talking about interviews of sports persons, so somebody is talking about hockey, somebody is talking about cricket, and some umpire will be talking about events that happens on the ground. So even though these are all falling under the same category, sports interview, but they all are bringing in new information and of a specific domain. So interviews is one very good activity for feature writing. So as I mentioned to you, it is very important because it uh, it is it is the writing that is adding dimension to any previous writing. Every time you interview a person, new facts are revealed on that particular domain, be it sports, be it trade, commerce, politics, or celebrity world, whatever it is. So similarly, these also become areas scope for interview. Cinema is one, celebrity is one, sports is one, politics is one, then administration is one, people at high-end positions, those are also source of information. So all this happens, and all these are the areas upon which you all can choose one's own subject for interview from these areas. But what goes into the interview? How does interview takes place? You see, this is very important. As I mentioned to you, first of all, one must decide the personality because obviously, if it is interview, it has to be a person whom you are going to interview. So it is very important. It's the very first step. The first step perhaps is the choosing the area, domain, then choosing the right person from their domain. So one has to look for who is the right person. Say, for example, if there are a lot of social activities that are happening, then a social worker can be one good person to interview. If a municipality is cracking on the stray dogs, then who can be? The commissioner cannot be a very good person to be interviewed. But a dog catcher can be a good person to be interviewed. No problem in it. If there is a delay in the aircraft departure, then whom you can interview about why there is delay. Airport manager can be a good person to be interviewed. And then how do you set up the interview? You contact the person and then consider his own priorities. You are not somebody who can always barge into somebody's privacy, somebody's uh, function, somebody's action, somebody's work, and then say no, you have to give me interview. No, it is not like this. Give him or her a time, put in a request, then honor if they are not available. If they say, no, I'm sorry, I'm not available, you must honor that also because it is the privilege of the person whom you are contacting. You cannot, force someone. Say, for example, you want to present an article based on interview on a restaurant. How do you make it happen? You cannot simply take your machine and go into a restaurant and start interviewing here and there and anybody, Tom and Harry. No, that cannot happen because that is a private space and it is a commercial activity. Your one such, or I mean, I mean to say not particularly you, but what I'm trying to say is the person who is making the interview, he can spoil the business and thereby he can end up in a very big legal problem. So, first of all, approach a person, explain yourself, give due time for consideration, then respect his approval or disapproval. Even if one is not making oneself available, it is the duty of, because I'm talking to you on this particular aspect because I have conducted more than maybe I think roughly 1,000 interviews during my tenure in All India Radio as well as in the interactive radio counseling program of IGNO. And from my that experience, I can say that interview is a very tricky. Sometimes you have to be very straightforward as well, but that you have to look for the information. Say, for example, if it is a site where an accident has place and nothing is happening, then of course you can ask the person concerned, administration, that yes, sir, so people are suffering. So what you are doing, what you are planning to do. But even then, you have to be very polite and accept their version, their verdict. So those are the people who are best decision maker, and they are in a capacity to take the decisions. If one doesn't agree once, it is very important, that you have to keep following up with the person, with the personality, or with the person who is in charge of another personality. That means private secretaries, ADCs, etc., for big people. Then you have to follow up quite frequently, and definitely you will succeed in getting an appointment and maybe an interview. There are a lot of incidents where people were the first or second or third times not permitted for the interview, but eventually when they persisted, things become quite possible. Uh, Getting ready for interview is very important. Getting ready for interview means one should have properly dressed. One should have whatever equipment one would like to take with oneself. If it is a recording interview, one must have well good quality recorder, properly checked for its power backup, and also if ensure that it is working, or if there is an assistant with you, you explain to the person that yes, I will be coming with the recorder and there will be an assistant with me. He or she will write. If it is note taking, you must also explain that I will take the notes, and because that is more risky. How do you? Many people do not agree to that because it is very uncertain how will you represent that person through his interview. So what you look for in the interview? There is no very huge theoretical background to it. It is just you want to know about the person, his work, his hobbies, his or her experiences, their worldview, their views, their knowledge about specialized area if they happen to be professionals, and also how do they look in general and what they would like to discuss about. So all these things are part of the interview. The next thing which is very important is that one must have certain questions ready, because if one has agreed for your interview, then he or she can immediately ask what will be your questions. So there you should one should not fumble. A good interview, a good creative writer who is willing to write something on based on interview must have pre decided questions before one meet the personality, because if you meet the person whom you are going to interview and don't think that we will meet next time and explain it, that nobody has such free time and people do not appreciate it if one is not very clear in one's own version and he or she explains or hesitation, so it is not appreciated. So one should be ready, sir or ma'am. These are my questions. If you will permit them, fine. If there is any alteration to be made, I am ready to do it. Now, there's a way as to how to ask the questions. One has to be very uh, pleasing, one has to be very respectful of the interviewee, respect his or her own reservations, and also the style of the questions. I think we discussed it the other day also, where we discussed that interview should not be something like that can be answered in like yes or no. There should be little space for for description. There should be little space for the person to add what you have already said, and information substantiation should be there, like that. Specifically, care must be taken while interviewing people who are not very high uh, and personalities. People who are, let's say, for example, if somebody is working in the field, rural folk, person who is clad in the traditional attire, or a lady who is selling the home produced vegetables in the market, how do you approach them? So you have to use the metaphors, you have to use the words which are very familiar to them, which are very appropriate, and they should feel as if they are respected and they are persons of concerns. So if you make them persons of concerns, instead of making them self-conscious about their own state, about their own something that they are not below average or something like that, is not the way. So they should feel respectful, and you should give them due recognition. It is not very important that every knowledgeable person is only well dressed and looking very smart. So very ordinary people can be very useful subject for interviews. So that must be respected. So the person should be given some time. So these are my questions. If one would like to read all those, enough time should be given for that. Then the interviewer must be very good listener. He or she must not override the interview, override the proceedings. He should allow the person to reply, to give details as to whatever extent one wants to, and perhaps one can interrupt with the appropriate interrupting words, uh, sir. But I would also like to add whatever you have said. That is yes, fine. But I would also like you to add this thing in your answer or something like it. So with proper apologies, with proper interrupting words, one can also do that, but not very often. As far as possible, interruption should be avoided, and later on, maybe in the production, this can be taken care. So these are few things. Like sometimes we take notes, so one must have very trained memory for that. One should be able to memorize what was stated, and while taking the notes, it's not possible to take note of the entire conversation. So that means one should have very clear or trained memory. Means one should have an aptitude to remember things factually correctly. Uh, then it is very challenging to reconstruct the interview. That is very important. Perhaps one should check the check the written articles based on interviews with the person once it is reconstructed, so that there is no scope for ambiguity or there is no scope for misrepresentation of the person concerned. So all these are very important aspects of interview. Just a couple of other things about interview is very importantly, how do we prepare questions? This is very important because interviews definitely be having questions, and uh, how do we prepare? First of all, I have already said that the question should be prepared in advance. Second thing, which is very important, they should be in logical order. Means you cannot ask the last question in the, how uh, you have become very good international hockey player. You know, how do you feel like a hockey player? No, that is not the case. It should be what were your initial interests? How did you come into hockey? Who were your inspirations? What were the challenges? And so forth. So there are a lot of things that should be brought into it. Uh, Let us not forget that the questions which are in logical order are very easy to reconstruct or very easy to write an article on information sheet through this order. Uh, as I mentioned to you that we should avoid the questions which only have answers in yes or no, and they should be free from bias, and also we should be focused on our questions. We should not put questions which are not related to the person or his or her profession. So that is not required. We should also be very flexible in asking questions. We should not, if somebody is avoiding a question, we should understand uh, he or she might be having some reservation, and so we should honor that. Uh, so we should honor that the I should say the uh, intention of the person whom we are interviewing. What if he feels convenient, comfortable, but we cannot go on forcing. No, sir, you have to answer this question. It is his or her privilege. But if that is not happening, we should have the follow-up questions. Maybe certain hooked up questions there and then. If one is not answering in a particular to a particular question, maybe a secondary question having some tinge of the previous question can also work sometimes. Very important. Try not to forget the obvious. What is obvious means we should not say, for example, if we are interviewing some cricket player or celebrity, then we should have definitely questions about the film industry, about the actions, about certain issues which are very obvious with that person. So this is very important, and what is how it should proceed to make it proceed properly. The interviewer must, listen to the interviewee. I mean, person who is speaking, the person who is conducting the interview. We should listen patiently, carefully, and also, more importantly, watch the reaction on the person's face. How does one react? Sometimes, he forgets to speak, put it in the orality, and just moves his or her own hands, and also sometimes there are certain gestures, make face and eyebrows are risen like that. Those are also very important. If those can be filmed, they are fine, but otherwise, they have to be noted. They have to be recorded for the reaction of the person. Uh, Only issue which I thought to discuss with you with a little more detail is sometimes there is a lot of resistance in the interviews. A lot of resistance. How that resistance is handled? How the resistance is handled? Sometimes people do not want to come out with the information. They feel it is their private domain and they don't want to share with it. So what is the best way to overcome the resistance? You see, you can take a detour. You can switch over to something else, and then perhaps slowly and gradually you can come to that point. If that doesn't happen, you see, you take the conversation into another aspect of the person or aspect of the topic, and then make parallels. You can quote somebody else, and in contrast, then the person may be more will be more interested in giving his version, which he or she didn't think appropriate when there was no comparison. So you have to handle that kind of situation. There are certain times when we have there are evasive interview. They just want to dodge the questions. They will simply not take note what is being asked and continue to speak what they feel. Well, in that kind of situation, the person who is conducting the interview, he or she, must have a patience and shouldn't make it very obvious that they are not happy with the person, but yet they should keep on making efforts, bring the person to the center of the topic time and again by giving certain examples, by putting parallels and so forth, and maybe sometimes praising the person that yes sir, you have done a great job in that particular area. Do you still feel to contribute? Do you, because initially one person say no, I am old enough, why should I do anything for this particular area, I have done enough. But if you say, put the question, sir, there has been a very praiseworthy contribution by you in this particular area. Do you still feel that your experience can contribute more significantly, even though you are old enough? But yet, people would like to benefit from your experience. Would you like to, take this up yet? Something like it. Then the person feels, no, no, I am recognized. I have been reckoned for this my contribution, and then he or she may come with some information, not the way you must have thought, yet something will be positive happening there. The biggest problem in the interview is not that somebody is not ready to share the information, but there are certain attitudes that comes. Somebody is a very high end celebrity, you cannot approach. So you should know how to approach when you are putting the celebrity in the interview on the interview table. Then your question must not hurt. You have to give a lot of respect, add words which are flowery, and then you can put your question, sir, what is your view about this particular thing? So that way you might, because it's basically hit and trial. Nobody can predict, nobody can foresee everything that happens in the process of interview, because it is between the two minds, and it is not possible to fully pre-gauge the mind. So, well, we have discussed the interviews, what are their benefits, why they are important, how interviews are conducted, and how to bring about various situations which at times becomes very tricky. So the only thing is that good one should be good listener. One should be careful about not making any statement which might not be taken properly, or not taken in healthy manner by the person. So it is the duty of the person who conducts the interview to be well prepared, having all his aids together and workable mode, giving enough time and opportunity, ample scope for considering the questions, and then must have a backup plan, a list of good questions which might not be asked, but yet he should have certain questions in his under his belt. And very importantly, while conducting the interview, he should be very very polite, listening, and not insisting, not dominating the person, yet making the questions in a style that prompt the person on the other side of the table to come out with the answers. And obviously, questions that are having answers in yes or no should be avoided. So, dear listeners, dear students, learners. As I mentioned to you that today we will discuss two very important topics. That was the travel writing and also the interviews. What is the importance of interview? What goes into making an area for interview? What are the requirements for interview? What is the process of the interview? So forth. So in interview also there is a lot of scope for audio, video, and photographs, extracts because when we do the celebrity interviews or long interviews, then we also play some clips. Say for example, if you are interviewing a singer after many years, or if you are interviewing a senior artist, then you can show some clips and then you can talk about them. And maybe certain photographs also, those can also be used. Sometimes we can also quote, give certain quotations of big people, acclaimed personalities, and then based upon those, we can ask the certain questions from the people. And there are a lot of interviews for the electronic media, radio, television, and other social media. We see a lot of people are being interviewed. So there are advantages, there are disadvantages. Sometimes interviews go very smoothly. Sometimes they do not end in a very healthy situation. So one has to be very careful and to the best of his or her own ability, make it happen in very cordial atmosphere, emotional atmosphere, and in an interesting manner. Well, interview makes a very good information for the feature writing, for article writings. It's very important that all our information is not distorted, that we receive from the person, and if need be, and if it is requested, required, it should be cross-checked, it should be verified with the person. So today, I'm afraid I will have to rush for some other engagement. So I would say goodbye, and we'll meet tomorrow at 11 with another topic. Thank you. RC Chandigarh, I am taking a little early break because of some urgent assignment. But we have completed this block 2, DCE 2. It's 4 blocks. So tomorrow we will come again with the DCE 3, which is the story. So goodbye and see you tomorrow. Thank you. Thank you very much to be with us in this particular session. Okay, goodbye. Have a very good day.